Beneath Lake Huron, across the carvings of Castle Gardens Petroglyph Site, and within Isle Royale, ancient clues hint at lost hunters, hidden meanings, and forgotten miners. Mysteries that still challenge what we think we know. Out on the wide, cold waters of Lake Huron, everything looks calm from above. Just waves, sky, and horizon stretching forever. Boats pass, fishermen cast their lines, and nothing about the surface hints at what lies far below. But deep under that water, hidden for thousands of years, there is something that shouldn't be there, at least not in the way we expect. Because resting on the lake bed are stones, large, heavy stones, arranged in patterns that don't look random. They don't look like the work of nature alone. And once you realize that, the entire lake starts to feel different. Like you're no longer looking at just water, but at a place that is hiding a forgotten world. The discovery didn't happen in some dramatic moment. It started quietly with sonar scans, simple mapping tools used to study the bottom of the lake. Scientists were looking for ancient landscapes, places that existed before the water levels rose after the last ice age. What they found instead raised eyebrows immediately. Long lines of stones, curved formations, shapes that looked planned. At first, it was easy to doubt it. Nature can create strange patterns. Ice, currents, shifting earth, these forces can move massive rocks over time. But the more they looked, the harder it became to explain everything as random. Because some of these formations looked like drive lanes. That might sound simple, but it's not. A drive lane is something humans build. Lines of stones used to guide animals, usually for hunting. Indigenous groups across North America used this method thousands of years ago. They would arrange rocks in long paths that funneled animals like caribou into specific areas where hunters were waiting. And suddenly, the idea becomes clear. What if this place wasn't always underwater? It sounds obvious once you think about it, but it changes everything. Thousands of years ago, during the end of the Ice Age, water levels in the Great Lakes were much lower. What is now deep lakebed was once dry land, walkable land, livable land. People could have stood right where those stones are now. They could have built something there, hunted there, lived there. And then, slowly, as the glaciers melted, the water rose, inch by inch, year by year, until the land disappeared beneath the surface. If that's true, then these stone structures could be more than 9,000 years old. Let that sink in. That would make them older than many famous ancient sites we usually talk about. Older than cities, older than written history in most parts of the world. But the mystery doesn't stop there, because when researchers took a closer look, they found something even stranger. Among the stones, there was a rock with what appeared to be a carving. Not just any carving, an image that looked like a mastodon, an ancient animal long extinct. Now think about that for a moment. If the carving really does show a mastodon, then it connects human activity at this site to a time when those animals still existed. That pushes the timeline even further back, into a period where human history in North America is still being debated and re-examined. And suddenly, this isn't just about stones anymore. It's about rewriting what we thought we knew. Of course, not everyone agrees, and that's where things get complicated. Some experts believe the formations are natural, shaped by ice movement and geological forces. They argue that what looks like design might just be coincidence. Our brains are good at seeing patterns, even when they aren't truly intentional. But others aren't convinced by that explanation, because the layout of the stones, the spacing, the direction, they seem too purposeful, too consistent, like they were placed with a goal in mind. And when you add the possible carving into the mix, it becomes harder to ignore. So what do we really have here? That's the question no one can fully answer yet. And maybe that's what makes this so fascinating. Because unlike ruins on land, this site is hidden. It's not easy to visit, it's not easy to study. Every investigation requires special equipment, careful planning, and a lot of patience. The cold, dark water keeps its secrets well. Divers who have gone down there describe an eerie feeling. Low visibility, silence, shapes emerging slowly as your eyes adjust. And then, suddenly, you see them, lines of stones stretching across the lakebed, disappearing into the distance. It doesn't feel random when you're there. It feels intentional. It feels like something was built and then forgotten. There's also something else to consider. If this really was a hunting site, then it tells us something important about the people who were here. They weren't just surviving day to day. They were planning, organizing, working together to shape the land in a way that helped them succeed. That level of strategy changes how we see early humans in this region. It shows intelligence, cooperation, and deep knowledge of animal behavior. And yet, we know almost nothing about them as individuals. No names, no stories, no written records, just stones, and maybe a carving. It's like trying to understand an entire culture from a handful of clues. And every clue raises new questions. Why here? Why build something in this exact spot? Was it because of migration routes? Did animals naturally pass through this area? Or was there something else about this land that made it special? And what about the carving? If it really is a mastodon, who made it? Was it symbolic? A form of communication? A way to mark the importance of the site? Or is it something else entirely? Something we're misinterpreting because we want to find meaning? These are the kinds of questions that keep researchers coming back, because every time you think you understand it, something doesn't quite fit. And that's where the mystery lives. Deep underwater, beyond easy reach, in a place where time has been frozen in a very different way. On land, things decay quickly. Weather, plants, animals, they all change the landscape. But underwater, especially in cold freshwater like Lake Huron, things can remain preserved for a very long time. That means what's down there could still be almost exactly how it was left. A snapshot of a world that no longer exists. A world where humans walked across land that is now buried under waves. A world where animals, like mastodons, roamed freely, and where someone, at some point, placed those stones with purpose. There's a strange feeling that comes with that idea, because it reminds you how much of history is hidden, not lost. Still there, just out of reach, waiting. And maybe that's the most powerful part of this story. Not the stones themselves, not even the possible carving, but the realization that beneath something as familiar as a lake, there could be entire chapters of human history we haven't fully read yet. It changes how you look at the water. It's no longer just a surface, it's a cover, a layer hiding something older, deeper, and far more mysterious than it appears. So the next time you imagine standing at the edge of Lake Huron, looking out over that endless stretch of blue, remember this: below you, far beneath the waves, there may be the remains of a place where people once stood, planned, hunted, and left behind traces of their existence. Traces that are only now being discovered. And even now, we're still asking the same question. Were these stones shaped by nature, or are they the silent proof of a forgotten human story, waiting to be fully uncovered? Out in the open land of Wyoming, where the wind never really stops and the sky feels bigger than it should, there's a place that doesn't look dramatic at first glance. Just rock formations rising from the earth, shaped slowly over time by wind and weather. But if you walk closer, really close, you start to notice something strange. Marks, lines, shapes carved into the stone. And suddenly, this quiet place, Castle Gardens Petroglyph Site, doesn't feel quiet anymore. It feels watched. It feels like the past is still here, pressed into the rock, waiting for someone to understand it. The carvings are everywhere once you see them. Not in neat rows or clear patterns, but scattered across the rock faces like pieces of a puzzle that was never meant to be easy. Some are simple, lines, circles, shapes that look almost like symbols. Others are more detailed, figures that look like animals or humans or something in between. And that's where the mystery starts to pull you in. Because no one can say for sure what all of these carvings mean. They weren't written as a language we can easily read. There's no key, no translation guide. Just images, frozen in time, made by people who lived here long before written history reached this land. You try to make sense of them. One carving looks like a person with long limbs, maybe holding something. Another looks like an animal, maybe a deer, maybe something else entirely. Some figures seem to wear strange shapes around their heads, almost like masks or headdresses. And then there are the abstract ones, spirals, grids, shapes that don't clearly match anything we recognize. It's like standing in front of a message written in a language you've never seen before. You can feel that it means something, but you can't quite read it. The people who made these carvings were likely ancestors of Native American tribes who lived in this region thousands of years ago. They didn't carve these rocks randomly. Every mark took time, effort, and intention. Stone tools, patience, repetition. This wasn't something done quickly. So the question becomes, why? Why carve into rock that would last for thousands of years? Was it a form of storytelling? A way to record events like hunts or journeys? Or was it something more spiritual? Some researchers believe these carvings could be connected to visions, experiences during rituals where individuals believed they were connecting with something beyond the physical world. If that's true, then what we're looking at isn't just art. It's a record of personal, possibly sacred experiences. Think about that. Each carving could represent a moment where someone felt they touched something greater than themselves, and they chose to leave that moment here in stone. But then again, not all of the carvings fit that idea neatly. Some seem too structured, too repeated. Certain symbols appear more than once in slightly different forms, like they had a shared meaning among many people. That suggests communication, a system, something closer to a visual language. But if it was a language, why can't we understand it now? Because whatever knowledge was used to interpret these symbols wasn't written down in a way that survived. It was likely passed through spoken words, through stories, through teaching, and over time those connections were lost or changed. And now we're left with the symbols, but not the full story. There's also something else that makes Castle Gardens feel different. It's the setting. These carvings aren't hidden deep in caves, they're out in the open, exposed to the sky, to the sun, to the wind. That means the people who made them wanted them to be seen, at least by certain people. But who? Travelers passing through? Members of their own group? Spiritual leaders? Or even something beyond human? It sounds strange, but when you stand there, looking at these figures, you can't help but feel like they were placed with purpose, not just in meaning, but in location. Some carvings are positioned higher up, harder to reach. Others are clustered in specific areas, almost like gathering points. It's not random, and that makes you wonder if the site itself held special importance. Maybe this wasn't just a place people passed through. Maybe it was a destination, a place where something important happened, again and again, across generations. And if that's true, then these carvings are not just individual expressions. They're part of a larger pattern, a long tradition, a shared understanding that we no longer fully have access to. Over time, nature has done what it always does. Wind has worn down the edges of the carvings. Rain has softened the lines. Some figures are clear, others are barely visible, like they're fading back into the stone. And yet, they're still here, still holding on, still asking questions. There's one more layer to this mystery that people don't always think about: time. These carvings weren't all made at once. Some are older than others, some may have been added generations apart. That means this site wasn't just used once, it was used again and again by different people, possibly even different groups, over a long period, each generation adding their own marks, their own meanings, their own stories, and over time those layers built up into what we see today. A mix of voices, a mix of intentions, all carved into the same stone. That makes interpretation even harder, because what looks like a single message might actually be many messages, overlapping, interacting, even contradicting each other. It's like trying to read a book where every page was written by a different person in a different time for a different reason, and no one left a guide. Still, people try to understand. Archaeologists study the shapes, compare them to other sites, look for patterns. They analyze the style of carving, the depth of the lines, the placement on the rock. And sometimes they find connections, similar symbols in other parts of the region, clues that suggest shared ideas or cultural links. But even with all that effort, the full meaning stays just out of reach. And maybe it always will, because some parts of history aren't meant to be fully solved. Not because they're impossible, but because they belong to a way of thinking, a way of seeing the world that is very different from ours. A way that doesn't translate easily into modern understanding. So instead of clear answers, what we get is something else. A feeling. When you stand in front of these carvings, there's a quiet awareness that you're looking at something deeply human. Not in a modern sense, but in a timeless one. Someone stood here, held a tool, and chose to leave a mark that would outlast them, outlast their voice, outlast their entire world. And now, thousands of years later, you're standing in front of it, trying to understand, trying to connect. And maybe that's the real mystery of Castle Gardens Petroglyph Site. Not just what these carvings mean, but how they still manage to reach across time, across cultures, across lost knowledge, and make you feel like there's something important here. Something just beyond understanding. Something that invites you to look closer, think deeper, and accept that not every story comes with a clear ending. Some stories stay carved in stone, waiting, not to be solved completely, but to be experienced. Far out in the cold, deep waters of Lake Superior, there's an island that feels cut off from everything. No cities, no noise, just forest, rock, and the constant sound of wind moving across the land. This is Isle Royale, a place that looks untouched, almost wild enough to feel like no one has ever truly claimed it. But that feeling doesn't last long, because once you start looking closer, you begin to notice something strange. Scattered across this remote island are pits, deep, old pits carved into the earth. At first they look natural, like sinkholes or random breaks in the ground, but they're not. They were dug. And they were dug a very, very long time ago. No machines, no modern tools, just human effort. That's where the mystery begins to unfold. Because these aren't just a few pits. There are thousands of them. Across Isle Royale and nearby areas around Lake Superior, researchers have found evidence of ancient copper mining. Mines that go back as far as 4,000 to 6,000 years ago, maybe even more. That means long before large cities, long before written history reached this part of the world. People were already here, digging into the ground with purpose. They weren't just passing through, they were mining. And not in a small way. These early miners were searching for native copper, pure copper that exists naturally in large chunks, sometimes right near the surface. This region is one of the few places on Earth where such copper can be found in abundance. And the people who lived here knew it. They didn't have iron tools. They didn't have advanced technology as we define it today. But they had knowledge. They understood the land. They knew where to dig, how to extract the metal, and how to shape it. Hammerstones, large rocks used as tools, have been found near many of these pits. You can imagine someone standing there thousands of years ago, striking copper again and again, slowly separating it from the surrounding rock. It wasn't easy work. It took time, strength, patience, and yet they did it on a scale that still surprises researchers today. So the question naturally comes up, what happened to all that copper? Because if you look at the amount that was likely mined, something doesn't quite add up. The volume of copper that appears to have been extracted from this region is massive, way more than what has been clearly accounted for in artifacts found nearby. Yes, some copper tools, weapons, and ornaments have been discovered across North America, and many are linked to this region, but not enough to match the scale of the mining. So where did the rest go? That question has been asked again and again, and it's never been fully answered. Some believe the copper was widely traded, moving across vast distances through networks that connected different groups of people. If that's true, then this island, this quiet, remote place, was once part of a much larger system, a kind of ancient economy that stretched farther than we often imagine. Others suggest that much of the copper may still be hidden, lost over time, buried, or even melted down and reshaped in ways we can't easily trace today. And then there are the more mysterious ideas, the ones that suggest something bigger, something we don't fully understand yet. Because when you see how much effort went into these mines, it raises another question. Why here? Why invest so much time and energy into extracting copper from this specific place? Was it purely practical, just a valuable resource? Or did copper hold a deeper meaning? In many ancient cultures, metals weren't just tools. They had symbolic value. They were connected to status, to spirituality, to identity. Copper, with its bright, almost glowing surface, might have been seen as something special, something worth seeking out, even in a remote and challenging environment like Isle Royale. There's also the question of how organized these mining efforts were. This wasn't random digging. The pits are often clustered, suggesting planned activity. Groups of people likely worked together, returning to the same spots over time, expanding the mines, going deeper, extracting more. That kind of coordination points to a level of social structure that we don't always associate with ancient communities in this region. It suggests planning, knowledge passed down, a shared goal. And yet, despite all of this, we don't know exactly who these miners were in a clear, direct sense. We can connect them to broader ancient cultures of the Great Lakes region, but their individual stories, their names, their lives are lost. All that remains are the marks they left behind. The pits, the tools, the traces of effort carved into the land. Walking through these areas today feels different once you understand that. You're not just walking through nature. You're walking through an ancient work site, a place where people once stood, worked, struggled, and succeeded. And then, at some point, they stopped. That's another part of the mystery. The mining didn't continue endlessly. It wasn't carried forward into later historical periods in the same way. Something changed. Maybe resources became harder to reach. Maybe trade networks shifted. Maybe cultural priorities evolved. Or maybe something else happened, something we don't have clear evidence for. Whatever the reason, the activity faded, and over time, nature began to reclaim the land. Forests grew. Soil shifted. The pits remained, but they became part of the landscape, quiet and easy to overlook unless you know what you're looking at. And for a long time, many people didn't fully understand what they were seeing. But once the connection was made, once it became clear that these were ancient mines, it changed how we look at this entire region. Because it tells us that long before modern industry, long before large-scale mining operations, humans were already engaging with the earth in complex ways. They were extracting resources, shaping their environment, building systems that connected people across distances, and doing it all without leaving behind written records to explain how or why. That leaves us with a story told through fragments, through physical evidence, through patterns that we have to interpret carefully. And every interpretation comes with uncertainty. That's what keeps this mystery alive. Because even with all the research, all the discoveries, there are still gaps, still questions, still that sense that we're only seeing part of the picture. And maybe that's what makes Isle Royale so compelling. It looks quiet, it feels remote, but beneath that calm surface is a history of effort, knowledge, and purpose that stretches back thousands of years, a history that challenges simple ideas about the past and reminds us that even in the most isolated places, humans have always been driven to explore, to use what the land offers, and to leave their mark. Risti was, sometimes in ways that take thousands of years for us to fully begin to understand. So the next time you picture this island, surrounded by the cold waters of Lake Superior, don't just see wilderness, see the shadows of those ancient miners. Hear the echoes of stone striking copper. And remember that beneath the quiet, there is a story still waiting, not fully uncovered, not fully explained, but very much still there.